Welcome to the Perspective Knoll, a home to original fantasy stories. Videos are uploaded once a week, feel free to like and subscribe. Enjoy the journey. Chapter 12 Ed's Killer Revealed. Charles found himself on the top floor of Merlin's Inn that evening, in a small room with minimal furniture. As he stretched out on the very hard cot, all the events of the day danced around in his mind. They were all bits of a puzzle. I must put the pieces in the right place. I know there are pieces I've missed. It wasn't long after that thought, Charles succumbed to a deep sleep. Charles woke the next morning with a renewed resilience and calmness. He grabbed his new clothes that he picked out yesterday evening and was paid for by the mayor of Jordan's Post and headed down the stairs. The lobby itself was very quiet and the only person there was a woman behind the counter. She had a piece of paper in front of her and appeared to be drawing something. She was startled slightly when she realized Charles was staring at her. He gave her a friendly smile and asked, "So I'm gonna leave. What do I owe you for the night stay?" The woman had straightened up and moved to the edge of the counter. "The mayor had paid for your room," she answered and then held out a small bag. "This was also meant for you. It's filled with a soft snack known as jelly bites. It is another token from the mayor." Charles had taken the bag and thanked her and made a mental note to himself, that if he had run into the mayor again, that he would thank him. He gave the woman a final farewell and walked out into the world. It was early morning and the sun had yet to appear through the trees. It was a calm blue sky morning, and the air was still. Charles breathed in a lungful of air and stretched as big as he could and then began to walk down the road. As he headed down the path that led south, which was the way that he and Dale and Harmon had first entered the town by, Charles saw Harmon sleeping under a tree. "Hey, Harmon, are you awake?" Charles shouted and walked off the road and towards the tree where Harmon was. "I could use your help if you're up for it." Harmon cracked open one very sleepy eye and groaned. "It's so early, Charles." Harmon stretched and then leaned up against the tree trunk. "You seem to have a fire under you this morning. What's on your mind?" "For starters, Harmon, I want to get back to Ed and Chloe's house in the forest. I'm sure that going back to the house will give me some important puzzle piece. I mean, I have the ability now to see fragments of the past. Who knows, maybe I can see who killed Ed." Harmon yawned and scratched his chest and gave Charles a very sleepy stare. "Okay, I can do that for you. How about you jump on my back, and I will carry you? We can make better time through the Brunel forest that way." "I'm not so sure, Harmon." Charles began to decline the invitation on the count he was not comfortable at all on the back of any animal, yet alone a massive talking bear. "Nonsense, now get on my back and hold tight." Harmon tore off at a great pace once Charles was in a comfortable position and had a good grip of Harmon's fur just behind his shoulders. As they traversed through the forest, Charles was putting the pieces together in his mind. As all detectives know, you start at the beginning, seeing all the parts and remembering details you may have forgotten. Subtle clues that looked ordinary and in place at first, but the more you analyze the entire scene, that's when you see things are clearly out of place and the reasons why. Charles felt the best place to start was the painting in the shed and to go back to his world. Going back to the beginning brings new answers to old questions. Charles and Harmon saw the Spencer house in a clearing where four narrow dirt paths crossed at the west side of the house. Charles asked Harmon to stay close in case there may be something else here. It's not uncommon for the killer to return to the scene of the crime, especially if they know the house is unoccupied. Charles and Harmon made their way to the shed where they had entered Lufforain from the picture hanging on the wall. Charles did look around for a moment to see if there were any signs that someone had been there recently, but could find no such clues. "So, you want to go into your world and see if your abilities work there? So that you can see who Ed's killer was?" Harmon asked. "That's the plan, if I can get back there, that is." Charles rubbed his hands together and took a deep breath. He placed his hand in the middle of the oil painting, which was just a shade of black, and to Charles' relief, his hand went into it. He could feel warm air on the other side. He glanced at Harmon one last time and then climbed into the painting. The next moment Charles was flung back into his world and slammed hard into the back of a closet door. It was dark and there were a few clothes on hangers that were getting in his way. He slid the closet door open and there was the inside of the Spencers' master bedroom. There was a light coming from the sun and it felt like late morning, just as it was in Lufforain. The bed lay before him and was stripped of its sheets, and the blood that was splattered along the wall had already been cleaned up and freshly painted over. Charles looked around and noticed that the carpets had just been cleaned as well. "Damn, some people work way too fast," he said out loud. Charles took a deep breath and closed his eyes. He was trying to picture what could have happened here. When he opened his eyes again, he was surprised to see 2 golden orbs floating around the room in the corner by the closet. One moved over to the bed and the other hung in the air by the closet door. Then they slowly materialized into a grainy golden form of who they were, and Charles was stunned. One was no doubt Ed, lying in his bed and was eyeing the figure that also appeared from the golden orb. It was Argatha, hovering near the bed. The pair seemed to be talking about something, yet it came in very muffled and unfortunately, Charles could not read lips. Then Argatha points to something in the closet and a bowling ball had come out. It floated over to the top of Ed's head and hung there. Argatha was telling something to him that appeared to be urgent. Ed seemed indifferent about whatever it was, and he then turned his head to ignore her. After that, the ball raised to the ceiling and began to drop. Before the ball made impact, Charles looked away and knew that was something he did not want to see. Suddenly there was a crash coming from the closet and a large ball of fur broke through into the bedroom. Charles had leapt back in shock and then realized that it was none other than Harmen himself. Charles had shouted at him. "What the hell are you doing here, Harmen? You can't be here, this is my world." "Well, I thought you might need some help and that shed made me feel uncomfortable. It's kind of creepy when you're alone, especially when you know a murderer had come through at some point," Harmen answered as he looked around and smelled the air. "Smells funny in here. Welcome to an old person's house, they all smell like this. Especially if they've died in it." Charles walked over to the closet and saw that the painting had been knocked off the wall when Harmen had gone through it. He picked it up and placed it on the bed and scratched his head. "Well, any luck?" Harmen asked. "Oh yeah. My abilities work here, and if what I saw was true then, shit." Charles had a hard time believing it and now wondered if Harmen, who is closer to a friend of Argatha than anything, would be working with her. "So, who is it?" Charles gave a sigh and knew that the truth is all he could say. It was Argatha. Charles studied Harmen's face hard while the bear processed the information. "But why?" Harmen asked, and his face twisted with a rage. "She was always there for them. Chloe was her friend. Look, I saw them possibly arguing about something before she killed him. Ed seemed at peace with whatever the misunderstanding was about, and in the end. I don't know, Harmen. This changes a lot. She lied to us in the beginning. The question is why? You think she was being controlled or commanded by someone to carry out a death sentence?" Harmen asked, and he too was now wandering around the bedroom, sniffing anything that could pose as a clue. Hell, Charles rubbed his chin and walked over to the far side of the bed and once more concentrated on the scene between Ed and Argatha. Once more, Ed's body filled the bed with his golden, sand-like self, and Argatha was already in mid-sentence speaking down at Ed. Then something caught Charles' eye, and it was something that hung around Ed's neck. He thought to pause the scene, and just like that, the pair of them stopped and froze in time. "What are you looking at?" asked Harmen, who could not see the golden figures of what Charles was studying. "A clue, I think," said Charles, and he leaned in close to Ed and looked over the strange necklace. The chain wasn't golden like the rest of the body, clothes, and even the bedding. But it was a steel gray, and yet the item that rested on Ed's chest from the necklace was something that appeared black and distorted compared to the rest of the images. "Damn, I wish I could capture what I'm seeing with a camera." "What is it?" asked Harmen as he stood as close to Charles as possible without knocking him over, and he tried with all his might to force the images into his mind as Charles was seeing them. "There's something around his neck. I don't think it's from here." "What I mean is I think it's from your world," explained Charles as he reached out and tried to grab the trinket, but the moment he touched it, the images faded. Charles stood up straight and pondered. "Harmen?" asked an unfamiliar voice, and it made both Charles and Harmen jump. Charles turned to his left and saw a man standing in the doorway of the master bedroom and the hallway. He wore jeans and a black shirt with a strange symbol on the chest and the words beneath it, Red Coheed and Cambria. "It is you, and who are you?" the man eyed Charles suspiciously. "My name is Charles Woods and I'm a detective and I am taking part in an investigation here." May I ask who you are? I'm Anthony Spencer. Chloe and Ed are my parents. Were my parents? Ah, the Anthony I have heard of. Charles walked over to the man and stretched out his hand for a handshake. Anthony shook it in return and the tension had died down. How are you here, Harmon? Asked Anthony, now walking over to the bear to give him a hug. I followed Charles here. After I brought him back to the shed where the painting is. Anthony turned and asked Charles. So, you've seen Lufforain? A small bit of it as far as I can tell. We never left the forest, Charles answered. How did you know about the painting? Anthony had asked. Argatha showed us where it was. Anthony gave Charles a questionable look. Us? A very close friend of my son. The pair had gone to college together and in turn, Shawn, well my son's friend, he got me through a lot. So, I was in town and thought he might want to get out and see what it's like to walk in my shoes. Charles paused, and his heart sank. Truth is, I don't know where he is now. He could be hurt or worse, I don't know. Anthony studied Charles for a moment, and he felt sympathy for the man. He leaned on Harmon and whispered something in the bear's ear. Charles thought this was odd and yet wasn't sure if Anthony was the skittish type or one to get offended easily. At this point, Anthony knew about everything that his parents had gone through. What did you think of Argatha? Is she still around? Anthony questioned Charles. I wasn't sure at first and now. Charles paused and wanted to test Anthony's knowledge of a lawman in Lufforain. I have seen what Argatha is. I have witnessed her killing your father. Anthony's face dropped, but not to sorrow, it was rage. Charles could tell that it was one of those emotions that he had held back for the sake of not having an argument with his mother. You actually watched her kill my father? Just moments ago when we came through the painting. I used my ability to see what transpired in the past in order to bring the one responsible to justice. The locals there call the title a lawman, Charles answered. So, you adapted some powers too, Anthony said as he was accepting what Charles had explained. That place can bring out the best in good people. However, what I found out through my father is that bad people become terrible. I have spent time in Lufforain. I wasn't there during the battle with the trolls, but I have spent time with the elves of the Brunel forest. Harmon here, we have gone on an adventure or two ourselves. Argatha on the other hand, I always felt something was off about her. Off, like what? Asked Charles. I just got a vibe that she was playing a part. Anthony shrugged his shoulders and walked past Charles and out into the kitchen. Would you like some food? Lufforain food isn't exactly what we're used to. Hell, man, anything would be great, Charles answered as he followed Anthony through the hallway and into the kitchen. Anthony ended up making a few tuna fish sandwiches and had brought out some cheese and crackers as well. Of course, Harmon was not excluded from the meal even though he was too big to fit down the hallway. Anthony still tossed him food and there happened to be a half-pound of beef in the fridge that was about to go bad that Harmon inhaled. Charles asked more questions to Anthony such as what day it was, and Anthony answered that it was July 22nd of 2020. Charles was relieved to hear this because when he and Shawn entered Lufforain, it was the 19th of July, so that meant that time was the same there as it was for them in their world. He asked Anthony if there was anything that he knew about the painting itself. Anthony replied simply that it needed to be hung up for it to have its power. Beyond that there was nothing else he could say that Charles didn't already know. They finished their conversation and their meal and that's when Charles had an idea. I want to take the painting somewhere else. Can I do that? Charles asked. Sure, but why? Anthony was just starting to do the dishes. It's not safe here and if Argatha returns, I want her to be turned around so that it would take time for her to get her bearings again. I can't trust her and beyond why she killed your father, I don't want her finding your mother and doing the same to her. Charles reached in the fridge and grabbed a diet soda. I want to hang it up in a place I can trust. Get back to Lufforain, tell the authorities there that the fairy known as Argatha has committed a murder in my world. Then I want to grab Shawn and hopefully never return to that place. I like your plan, Mr. Woods. I can be of some help if you want company. Anthony offered as he too grabbed a soda from the fridge. I have abilities too. You said that before, what sort of abilities? Anthony laughed and took a sip of his drink. You know of the Hulk, right? You mean like comic book Hulk? The movies, the big green guy? Yep. Like that, just not green and less angry. Wow, I can't wait to see that, Charles said excitedly. Sure, yeah, come with us. I'll go grab the painting and we'll head out. Charles went into the back room and rehung the painting in the closet just so Harmon could go back to Lufforain. The bear being too large to fit through the hallway or out of a window would have been outrageous to even attempt to put him in a car. Charles had a plan for the location of the painting, and knew that having a bear at his side to present the painting to its new home would be nothing short of a deal-breaker. Once Harmon was through, Charles took the painting down and went back into the kitchen. Anthony had finished his soda and went around and turned off all the lights and made sure all the windows were closed and that the air was turned up, so that the AC wouldn't kick on as frequently.